The email confirmation sat in my inbox, a beacon of turquoise and gold, promising 5 days of sun-drenched, stress-free paradise. The Four Seasons Hualalai, presidential oceanfront villa. It had been my project, my secret goal, and my financial stretch for the past 3 years. Mark, my husband, had certainly earned the break, and the kids, 8-year-old Lily and 10-year-old Ethan, deserved every minute of running free on that pristine beach. But mostly, I, Sarah, desperately needed this reset button. I clicked the image of the villa layout, savoring the details: 4 bedrooms, private infinity pool, and the pièce de résistance, the main living area with the sprawling, curved, custom-built dining banquette, strategically positioned to offer a 270-degree view of the Pacific. This wasn't just a vacation, it was the antidote to the last 2 years of managing Mark's late-stage startup launch, which had nearly consumed our savings and our marriage. The cost was astronomical, a number I still flinched at, but I had used the unexpected bonus from my remote marketing job, combined with careful savings, to book it. I wanted this to be a moment of pure, uninterrupted family bliss, a reminder of why we fought so hard through the lean times. I poured myself a glass of water, the Seattle rain drumming against the window of our Tudor house, a stark contrast to the tropical warmth I was anticipating. It was late, and Mark was still reviewing server logs downstairs. I knew I should go to bed, but the excitement kept me wired. I started listing out the packing details: sunscreen, swim diapers for Lily, just in case, Ethan's new snorkeling gear, and the formal but casual dresses I'd bought for the 2 dinners Mark had promised. Just him and me, while a resort sitter watched the kids. A tiny, perfect fantasy, finally within reach. Then the phone rang. It was Mark, but he was calling my mobile from the home line. Strange. "Sarah, come downstairs. I have some news," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the excitement usually associated with a luxury vacation 3 days away. My stomach instantly coiled. It was the same tone he used whenever his mother, Eleanor, was involved. Eleanor, a woman who believed that motherhood was a lifetime job that included supervising her adult son's life and constantly evaluating her daughter-in-law's shortcomings. I walked down the stairs, already bracing myself. Mark was sitting on the edge of the sofa, scrolling through his phone, a picture of casual discomfort. "What's up? Is there a problem with the flight?" I asked, trying to sound breezy. He put the phone down and sighed, running a hand through his already messy hair. "No, the flight is fine. Look, something's come up. Mom called tonight." I froze. "Called about what?" "We agreed, this is our trip. She has her own summer plans." I know, but she's been feeling down. She's having trouble with Mrs. Henderson next door, and she says the house feels too quiet. She's missing the kids." He used the standard Eleanor playbook words: down, missing the kids, too quiet. My voice tightened. "Mark, we video chat with her 3 times a week. The kids see her every Sunday. She's perfectly fine." "No, listen to me," he insisted, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "She sounded really fragile, Sarah. She said she needs a change of scenery. And, well, I invited her to come to Hawaii with us." The blood drained from my face. I gripped the back of the sofa so hard my knuckles turned white. "You did what? Mark, are you insane? That villa is for 8 people, but we booked it for 4. We paid extra for the privacy and space. It was our trip." He winced. "I know it was, honey, but it's a 4-bedroom villa. She can take the 3rd guest room. It won't affect us." "It absolutely affects us. It affects every minute of privacy, every quiet breakfast, every dinner conversation. And Mark, I paid for this. It was my bonus." I felt the argument rising, hot and fast, after years of swallowing my resentment toward Eleanor. He stood up, mirroring my frustration. "Don't make this about money, Sarah. It's my mother. She won't be in our way. She just needs a few days of sunshine. And honestly, she was talking about how Lily and Ethan are getting older, and she worries about bonding time. She knows how to make them laugh. They adore her. The last sentence was the knife twist, a constant refrain in our household that implied my love, while sufficient, lacked the necessary spark Eleanor provided. I stood there, reeling, the Hawaiian dream dissolving into a Puget Sound downpour. The next 2 days were a blur of cold silence and strained packing. Mark, in a fit of appeasement, had booked Eleanor a first-class ticket, using air miles he'd previously insisted were for emergencies only. This small, grand gesture of familial devotion only amplified my bitterness, contrasting sharply with his complete disregard for my emotional investment in the trip. I sat on the edge of the bed, folding a resort shirt, the vibrant colors mocking my internal gray landscape. I wasn't just angry about the intrusion, I was hurt by the casual erasure of my planning, my effort, and my desire for intimacy with my immediate family. The villa, once a sanctuary, was now a shared space, a battlefield of passive-aggressive commentary and forced pleasantries. Eleanor, of course, was ecstatic. She called us twice the following morning, chirping about the lovely surprise and her much-needed break. She didn't once thank me or acknowledge my role in planning or paying for the luxury accommodation. Everything was framed as a blessing from Mark, her dutiful son. When we arrived at SeaTac, Eleanor was already waiting at the gate, having arrived ridiculously early. She was dressed in a pristine white linen suit, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, looking every bit the glamorous, slightly too entitled matriarch. She greeted me with a peck on the cheek and an immediate, sharp critique. "Sarah, darling, those sandals are sweet, but you need a wedge. Your ankles look stumpy in flats. I packed you a lovely pair, just in case." I forced a smile that felt brittle on my face. During the flight, the seating arrangement was the first tangible casualty of her presence. We were booked in a row of 4, Mark, me, Lily, and Ethan. Naturally, Mark insisted Eleanor sit beside him in the window seat, while I was relegated to the aisle, stuck next to a perpetually coughing businessman. "It's just easier, honey," Mark had whispered, pulling my small carry-on bag from the overhead bin and replacing it with Eleanor's heavy, monogrammed leather tote. "Mom gets airsick and needs the window. And she wants to see if they have the Crown on the in-flight entertainment." The kids, meanwhile, were already captivated by Eleanor. She had strategically brought a new, elaborately wrapped toy for each of them, a drone for Ethan and a sparkling unicorn diary for Lily. Gifts that, predictably, eclipsed the excitement of the flight itself. They nestled against her, giggling at her anecdotes, their little heads leaning into her shoulder, while I sat one seat over, feeling like an observer to my own family. Ethan, usually glued to me, didn't even look up when I offered him his favorite airplane snack. "Grandma already gave me Pringles, Mom," he mumbled, his focus fixed on Eleanor showing him how to work the drone remote. It was a calculated performance, and I knew it. Eleanor always managed to position herself as the fun, indulgent provider, making my role as the boundary-setting, healthy meal-making mother feel pedestrian and dull by comparison. The flight was agonizingly long. Every time I tried to lean over to talk to Mark, Eleanor would pivot, effectively blocking the view and interjecting with a story about Mark's childhood, implicitly reminding me of her seniority and longer history with my husband. I spent the flight tracing the outline of the villa's floor plan on a notepad, focusing on the curved dining banquette. That seat, the center, panoramic spot, was my seat. I had mentally claimed it the moment I booked the villa, picturing myself there, sipping coffee, watching the sunrise with my family gathered around me. It was a small, silly thing, but it represented my control and my vision for this perfect, hard-earned week. I repeated it to myself like a mantra. That seat is mine. I earned it. But even that small, internal claim felt tenuous, a whisper against the hurricane of Eleanor's arrival. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that the battle for the main seat at the resort was coming. And judging by the past 48 hours, I was already losing. Landing in Kona was a physical release from the emotional tension of the flight. The moment we stepped off the plane, the warm, fragrant air of Hawaii washed over us, momentarily lifting my spirits. Even Eleanor seemed to soften, trading her crisp suit for a flowy kaftan. But the peace was short-lived. The villa, when we finally arrived after a smooth private transfer, was breathtaking. Even better than the photos. It was vast, open, and smelled faintly of sea salt and plumeria. The sliding glass walls retracted completely, blurring the line between the luxurious interior and the sweeping ocean view. The kids immediately shrieked and dashed through the main room toward the infinity pool, their joy momentarily distracting me from the political maneuvering I knew was imminent. "Oh, Mark. This is simply divine," Eleanor cooed, gliding over the marble floors. "You always did have such expensive taste. This will do wonders for my arthritis." She didn't spare a glance at me, the person who had meticulously chosen, planned, and paid for the divine setting. We started bringing in the luggage. There was a quiet scramble for the bedrooms. Mark quickly installed Eleanor in the second-largest suite, which had a gorgeous garden view and a private lanai. Our main suite was ocean-facing, and the third and fourth rooms were smaller, designed for the kids or a nanny. I started unpacking the children's suitcases in the third bedroom, trying to establish a sense of normalcy, but I could hear Mark and his mother talking conspiratorially in the main room. Their voices were low, but the tone was unmistakable: planning. When I emerged, I found Mark setting up Eleanor's expansive collection of framed photos on the main living room console. Not photos of us, or the kids, but photos of her, Eleanor receiving an award, Eleanor on a cruise with her late husband, Eleanor looking youthful and glamorous. "Mark, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "It's a resort villa. We don't need to decorate it." "Mom said it feels cold," he replied, not looking up. "She just wants to feel at home." "It's a temporary thing, Sarah. Don't be dramatic." I walked past him, my gaze drawn to the main banquette. It was even more magnificent in person, a huge, U-shaped sofa surrounding a massive teak table, perfectly oriented toward the ocean. I walked over and touched the cushion of the center seat, the one that looked straight out over the water, feeling a surge of proprietary instinct. Just then, Eleanor emerged from her suite, impeccably dressed for the evening in flowing silk pajamas. She saw me standing by the banquette. "Ah, Sarah, there you are," she said, her voice laced with false sweetness. "Mark and I were just discussing the schedule. Since I'm cooking tonight, a little surprise, the kids love my chicken piccata. We need to sort out the seating for dinner. It's a bit of a small table for 5, isn't it?" "It seats 8 easily, Eleanor," I corrected, trying to maintain my ground. "It's huge." "Well, yes, but for conversation," she sniffed. "Anyway, I need to be close to the kitchen, so I'll take the corner seat here, right by the service entrance." She pointed to a less desirable spot. "And Mark, you must sit next to me, to help me with the serving. You know how my wrist is." This left 3 seats. Lily and Ethan immediately claimed the 2 seats closest to Eleanor. Lily wanted to show her the unicorn diary, and Ethan wanted to talk about the drone. That left my seat, the absolute, panoramic center, and one remaining seat on the end, facing slightly away from the view. I didn't need a map to see the trajectory of this move. I walked toward the center seat and pulled it out slightly. "Well, I'll take this one then," I stated, a challenge in my voice. Eleanor gave me a long, pitying look. She exchanged a glance with Mark, who was now sheepishly avoiding my eyes. It was a practiced, synchronized maneuver, a non-verbal agreement that sealed my fate. Then, Mark spoke, delivering the final, crushing blow, the words that would echo the title of the story and fracture my already fragile resolve. He didn't even have the decency to look at me when he said it, his voice low but firm. "Actually, Sarah, that's where I need to sit tonight. And for the rest of the trip. He paused, and then added the cruel justification, the line I would never forget. We gave your seat to Mom. The kids love her more, and it's easier for them to talk to her if she's in the middle. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, eclipsing the sound of the Pacific waves crashing just yards away. We gave your seat to Mom. The sheer callousness of the statement wasn't just about the physical seat, it was about the public declaration of my demotion, my perceived dispensability within my own family unit. Eleanor, who had been watching with a smirk of practiced neutrality, patted the banquette beside her, right in the coveted panoramic center. "Oh, Mark, you're so thoughtful," she purred, sliding into the spot I had visualized as my own. "Now, Sarah, darling, you can take the end seat by the window. You know you prefer to watch the sunset anyway, don't you?" I didn't answer. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sudden, blinding nausea that made the luxurious room spin. I looked at Mark, expecting, hoping for some sign of regret, some flash of recognition that he had just committed an act of profound betrayal against his wife. His face was blank, preoccupied. "Come on, Sarah. It's just dinner. Just sit down. We're all starving. Mom's chicken piccata is waiting." He waved his hand dismissively toward the table, as if I were a waiter delaying service. The kids, completely oblivious to the silent, seismic shift occurring in front of them, cheered for the chicken piccata and immediately started chattering to Eleanor, who was now firmly ensconced in the center, orchestrating the conversation and the seating arrangement like a benevolent queen. I walked slowly to the last remaining seat, the one at the very end of the curve, where the view was partially obscured by a palm tree and where I would have to lean awkwardly to even participate in the conversation. It was the geographic and emotional edge of the family circle. I sat down, feeling the cold, hard reality of my new position. I was an afterthought, an inconvenience, easily swapped out for the superior, more beloved mother figure. The dinner itself was an exercise in calculated exclusion. Eleanor dominated the conversation, regaling the kids with stories about Mark's childhood, stories they'd heard 100 times, but which she delivered with dramatic new flair. "And then, Ethan, your dad climbed right up that oak tree, a mischievous little monkey he was. And I had to call the fire department. That's why he's so good at climbing the corporate ladder now." Eleanor chuckled, squeezing Mark's arm possessively. Mark would laugh, prompting the kids to giggle and turn their heads away from me. Every time I tried to interject, to share a recent, relevant story about one of the kids, Eleanor would seamlessly talk over me or redirect the attention back to herself. When I tried to ask Ethan about his new school project, Eleanor immediately cut in. "Oh, Ethan, don't bore your mother with homework, sweetheart. Tell Grandma what kind of juice you want with your chicken." I saw the kids instinctively turn to Eleanor, the source of fun, the holder of all attention. Her phrase, "the kids love her more," was now a living, breathing reality unfolding directly in front of me. The food tasted like ash. I picked at the chicken, the expensive resort linen napkin clutched tight in my lap. I wanted to scream, to flip the table over, to demand the respect I deserved, not just as the trip's financier, but as the mother of the children and the wife of the man sitting next to her. But I remained silent, trapped by the years of training that had taught me to prioritize peace and avoid a scene, especially in front of the kids. The silence, however, was deafening, a roaring indictment of my marriage. It was during a lull in the conversation, when Eleanor was busy pouring Mark a glass of wine, that Lily finally spoke to me, her voice small. "Mom, are you okay? You look sad." Before I could answer, Eleanor slammed the wine bottle down, a little too hard. "Of course, your mother is fine, Lily. She's just tired from all the travel. Aren't you, Sarah? Now, tell Grandma, do you want to play a round of Go Fish after dinner? I brought my special cards." Lily's attention immediately snapped back to Eleanor, the momentary concern for me extinguished by the promise of a game. I watched my daughter turn away, and in that moment, I realized the depth of Mark's betrayal. He hadn't just given away my seat, he had endorsed the idea that I was the side character in my own family story. The following morning, the calculated exclusion continued, not just at the dining banquet but throughout the entire magnificent villa. I woke up early, still reeling from the events of the previous evening, determined to claim at least the sunrise. I found a lovely, quiet spot on a small secondary lanai, away from the main pool area. I brewed a cup of the expensive Kona coffee and sat down with my book, inhaling the fresh, salty air, trying to reclaim a sliver of the peace I had paid for. The silence lasted exactly 15 minutes. Suddenly, I heard the shrieks of the children and the booming, overly cheerful voice of Eleanor. They had discovered the same lanai. Surprise, kids! Grandma found the secret coffee spot. Mark, can you bring the waffle maker out here? This view is too good to miss. Eleanor had somehow commandeered the kitchen staff to bring out every possible breakfast accessory to the one peaceful corner I had found. Mark, ever the eager facilitator, appeared with the waffle maker and a plate of sliced fruit, nodding approval at his mother's ingenuity. He didn't even glance at me, the book open on my lap, my solitude shattered. "Oh, Sarah, you're here!" Eleanor exclaimed, feigning surprise. "Perfect! Could you just move your chair? We need the space for the waffle station. The kids want chocolate chips. You know how messy that gets." I slowly gathered my things, my coffee turning cold. The irony of being displaced from a quiet corner of my own expensive villa by the sheer force of my mother-in-law's demanding presence was not lost on me. I retreated to the main living room, the one area I thought was too large for them to colonize fully. But there, Eleanor had already set up Grandma's reading corner, complete with a new, enormous beanbag chair, several new books she'd bought for the kids, and a sign she had clearly brought that read, "Shush. Story time." The children were already huddled around her, listening to a dramatic reading of a fairy tale. Ethan, usually too cool for such things, was completely mesmerized. They were a picture of domestic bliss, a perfect family portrait, with me, their mother, relegated to the role of the invisible photographer. I realized then that Eleanor wasn't just here for a break, she was here to prove a point to Mark, that she was the superior female figure, the one who truly understood and connected with the children, making me unnecessary. I went to my bedroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. I pulled out my laptop, not to work, but to look up the fine print of the villa rental agreement. I was looking for any clause, any rule, that would justify a sudden, dramatic confrontation. But there was nothing. It was a private rental, Mark had given her permission. Legally, I had no grounds. Emotionally, however, the grounds were shifting beneath me. The foundation of my marriage felt like loose sand. I looked at the photos on my bedside table, a picture of Mark and me on our wedding day, and a recent one of the four of us at the pumpkin patch. They felt like relics from another life. When I finally emerged, hours later, the entire family was by the pool. Eleanor was in the infinity pool, teaching Lily how to do a proper Australian crawl, something I had been trying to teach her for months with limited success. Mark was sitting on the edge, laughing. When he saw me, he smiled a small, perfunctory smile. "Hey, sleepyhead. Mom's got the kids covered. Why don't you just chill? We're ordering pizza for lunch." "I think I'll go for a walk," I said, my voice flat. "Oh, come on, Sarah," he sighed, instantly defensive. "Don't be like that. It's a vacation. Just relax." "I can't relax, Mark," I said, finally letting a sliver of the frustration show. "I feel like a guest at my own event. I feel like I've been replaced. This was supposed to be our family trip, and you've turned it into a shrine to your mother." He rolled his eyes. "You are seriously overreacting. She's my mother. She's harmless. And the kids are having fun. Isn't that what matters? What matters is that you completely disregarded my feelings and my investment in this. You gave away my seat," I stressed the word, and then used the children as the justification. I told you, it's just easier for her to talk to them from the center, he insisted, his tone hardening. Why can't you just be the flexible one for once, Sarah? Why do you always have to make everything a drama? His lack of understanding, his reflexive defense of Eleanor and dismissal of me, was a breaking point. I turned and walked away, past the stunning pool, down the path to the beach. I needed to walk until the sound of the ocean drowned out the sound of his infuriating voice. I spent the afternoon on a remote stretch of sand, watching the distant waves. I didn't just feel angry anymore, I felt a chilling sense of clarity. The trip wasn't the problem, the seating arrangement wasn't the problem. The problem was that Mark allowed Eleanor to dictate the emotional structure of our family, and I was perpetually cast in the secondary, disposable role. I returned to the villa that evening, armored in a new resolve. I was done being the silent martyr. If Mark wanted drama, I would give him drama, but it would be on my terms, focused on the principle, not the petulance. The aroma of dinner was already wafting through the villa. Eleanor was back in the kitchen, preparing what she claimed was a traditional New England clam bake. In Hawaii, naturally. She loved to import her own traditions, superseding the local ones. I found Mark setting the table. He paused when he saw me, perhaps sensing the change in my demeanor. Look, Sarah, I'm sorry, he said quickly, a forced apology. I shouldn't have snapped earlier. Let's just enjoy tonight. I got us reservations for that fancy dinner tomorrow, just you and me. Okay. His offer was too little, too late, and offered with the condescending air of a parent bribing a child. That dinner is the only thing you haven't given to your mother yet, Mark. So, thank you for remembering your wife exists, I replied, my tone icy. He frowned. That's unfair, Sarah. Is it? Let's talk about the seating, I said, walking straight to the dining banquette. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a resort towel she had clearly borrowed. Oh, not this again, Sarah. We settled this yesterday. It's easier this way. No, Eleanor, we didn't settle anything. Mark decided it for me, I corrected, looking directly at her, not Mark. Tonight, I will be sitting in the center seat. I pulled out the chair I wanted, the panoramic one. Eleanor laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Don't be childish, dear. That's Mark's seat. It's the most comfortable, and he has a slightly bad back after the flight. He needs the best support. I turned to Mark. Is that true, Mark? Does your back suddenly require the exact seat I booked this villa for? He shifted uncomfortably. Look, it's not about my back, Sarah. It's about logistics. Mom needs the space because the kids are always coming up to her for seconds. It's just simpler for her to be central. So, it's logistics for her, but it's a temper tantrum for me, I summarized. Mark, I am asking you, as your wife and the person who made this entire trip possible, to allow me to sit in the seat I want, tonight. The kids, Lily and Ethan, sensing the tension, wandered in from the pool, dripping wet. They immediately gravitated toward Eleanor, as if her presence provided a safe harbor from the storm I was creating. Eleanor seized the moment. She enveloped the children in a grand hug, looking over their heads at me with a triumphant, martyred expression. Oh, my little chickadees. Don't worry about the silly chairs, she cooed to them, making sure I could hear every word. Grandma is happy to stand if it will keep the peace. But I do wish your mommy could see how much you want me to sit right here, so you can tell me all about your little sea turtle friends. Lily, prompted by the drama and Eleanor's persuasive tone, looked at me with wide, teary eyes. Mommy, please don't make Grandma move. We want her right here. And then Ethan, always the echo, chimed in with the phrase that finished me off. Yeah, Mom. Grandma's way more fun. She should have the best seat. The knife twisted one last time. Mark stepped toward me, his face showing a mix of embarrassment and annoyance. He put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was more restraining than comforting. "See, Sarah? Just drop it. It's one chair. We gave your seat to Mom. The kids love her more, and that's just the way it is right now. She's the focal point this week. Sit down and let's eat." In that moment, standing in the opulent villa, facing my husband, my children, and my smiling mother-in-law, I saw everything clearly. This was not a vacation, it was a referendum on my role, and I had failed. I was standing in the very spot I had worked 3 years to reach, and I had never felt further away from my family. I looked at the panoramic seat, now occupied by Eleanor, who was preening under the children's adoration. I looked at Mark, whose loyalty lay irrevocably with his mother. I looked at the children, whose honest, yet hurtful, words were merely parroting the dynamic Eleanor had engineered. I didn't sit down. I dropped my napkin on the marble floor and took a step back. I opened my mouth, not to argue about the seat, but to say something final, something definitive, when the first sound of the sirens pierced the Hawaiian tranquility. The sound of the sirens was close, too close for a peaceful resort setting. It was the frantic, urgent wail of an official vehicle, not a distant ambulance. It cut through the tension in the villa, freezing all 4 of us mid-confrontation. Eleanor, still in the coveted center seat, looked annoyed. "Honestly, Mark, can't they keep the noise down? This is a private resort." Mark, however, was already walking to the glass doors, peering out toward the entrance road. "That sounds like a police siren, Mom. Or fire. Something big." I stood my ground, watching the scene unfold. My anger had been replaced by a cold, detached curiosity. Whatever this was, it was an external force, something Eleanor couldn't control or manipulate. A large, black SUV, lights flashing but no siren blaring now, pulled up to the villa entrance. 2 men in dark, sharp suits, definitely not resort staff, got out, followed by a local police officer. Mark opened the front door, his face instantly shifting from annoyed husband to nervous businessman. "Can I help you, officers?" One of the men, who carried an official-looking briefcase, stepped forward. "Are you Mr. Mark Harrison? The owner of Harrison Tech?" "Yes, I am," Mark said, his voice now tight. "I'm Agent Miller, Securities and Exchange Commission, and this is Officer Kalani. We have a legal matter we need to discuss with you, sir, immediately and privately." The agent's tone was polite but entirely unyielding. My breath hitched. The sec. This wasn't a minor business hiccup. This was serious. Mark's startup, the one that had nearly drained our savings and caused endless stress, was apparently under investigation. Eleanor, having abandoned her clambake setup, was now standing right behind Mark, her glamorous facade cracking. "The sec? What nonsense is this, Mark? Tell them to go away. You on vacation?" Agent Miller didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on Mark. "I'm afraid this cannot wait, Mr. Harrison. We have reason to believe that the pre-IPO funding round you just completed involved significant misrepresentation of your company's actual valuation and assets, possibly constituting fraud." The word fraud echoed in the open, luxurious space. Lily and Ethan, sensing the shift from a family argument to a genuine crisis, clung silently to Eleanor's legs. Mark looked physically ill. "Misrepresentation? No, that's not right. We were just aggressive with our projections. It was an honest mistake, maybe a clerical error." Agent Miller held up a sheaf of papers. "We have an emergency restraining order on all corporate and personal assets exceeding a certain value, pending investigation. We also have a subpoena for immediate access to certain crucial financial documents that were stored in your primary residence in Seattle, specifically documents pertaining to the initial capitalization of the business." Mark paled even further. "Those documents are on my company's servers. I don't keep hard copies." "Actually, sir, our intelligence suggests otherwise. We believe the physical, signed agreements, the ones required for the initial wire transfer, are currently located in a safe deposit box tied to an account that requires 2 signatures for access. Your name, and the name of the secondary signatory on the incorporation paperwork, which we believe is a relative. Agent Miller looked around the room, his eyes scanning for any other adult. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice suddenly shrill. I'm his mother. I handle his documents. My name is on nothing. Absolutely nothing. Agent Miller paused, then looked at me. My name was Sarah Harrison. I hadn't been introduced, but I was clearly the only other adult female present. And who are you, he asked me directly. I'm Sarah Harrison. His wife, I said, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. Are you, by any chance, the secondary signatory on the incorporation documents for Harrison Tech, listed under the initial investor agreement? He pressed. My mind raced back 3 years. Mark had shoved a stack of legal papers in front of me late one night, muttering about the bank needing a secondary spouse authorization for the corporate account. I had barely glanced at them, trusting him, signing where he pointed. Yes, I admitted, the word tasting like lead. I think I am. The agent nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Mrs. Harrison, you are legally required to cooperate with this subpoena. We need to obtain those physical documents immediately. They are time-sensitive. Mark, finally seeing a way out, grabbed my arm. Sarah, you have to fly back tonight. Get the papers. Everything is in that safe deposit box. The entire company hinges on those initial signed contracts. But Agent Miller wasn't done. He looked at Mark with a grave expression. Mr. Harrison, until we review those documents, your current status is that of a person under investigation. Furthermore, we believe the corporate funds used to book this luxury villa were part of the potentially misrepresented assets. We are, effective immediately, seizing the right to occupy this premise. You, your mother, and your children must vacate this villa within the hour. The silence that followed Agent Miller's announcement was absolute, broken only by the whimpering of Lily, who finally understood the gravity of the situation. Seizing the premises. Vacate within the hour. The luxurious, expensive villa was now a crime scene, or at least, evidence. Eleanor's face, moments ago flushed with triumphant self-importance in the center seat, was now a mask of horror. Seize the villa? You can't. My son paid for this. This is absurd, she shrieked, finally stepping away from the precious banquet. Mark, however, was focused entirely on me. Sarah, listen to me. I need you to go. Now. You have the access codes to the safe deposit box. The flight is 5 hours. I need you on the next flight out. You must retrieve those documents, or everything is gone. Everything. The children were crying now, clinging to their father. The police officer, Officer Coloni, began making polite but firm movements toward the luggage. This was the seconds later moment. The moment the power dynamic shifted entirely, and the seat I was denied became irrelevant compared to the actual, structural necessity of my presence. I looked at Mark, my heart cold and hard. He hadn't just slighted me, he had entangled me in a massive financial and legal nightmare I hadn't known about. He needed me not as a wife, but as a signatory, a legal tool. So, let me get this straight, Mark, I said, walking closer to him, ignoring Eleanor's hysterical protests. 3 days ago, I was so unnecessary, so disposable, that you gave away my seat, the one I paid for, to your mother, because the kids love her more, and she's the focal point. My voice was low, but every word cut through the panic in the room. Now, suddenly, I am the only person in this entire resort who can save you, your company, and possibly our family's financial future, because my name is on your secret, initial documentation. Mark's desperation was palpable. He tried to take my hand. Sarah, please. Don't do this now. This is life and death for the business. We can talk about the seat later. I'll buy you a better seat. I swear. No, Mark, I pulled my hand away. We won't talk about the seat later. The seat was the symptom. The disease is your pathological need to put your mother first and treat me like your administrative assistant, a person whose only value is my compliance, my money, and my signature. Eleanor, realizing the shift, finally piped up, her voice laced with fear. Sarah, don't be foolish. Mark is your husband. You must help him. This is a family emergency. I turned to her, a small, cold smile on my face. You know, Eleanor, Mark said the kids love you more, and that's why you deserved the center seat. But funny enough, my name is the only one on the key to the safe that holds the only proof that Mark didn't commit fraud. My signature, the one you dismissed, is the key to our legal survival. The agent and the officer stood silently, observing the domestic drama. The kids, huddled together, looked between their mother and their grandmother, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. I looked at Mark one last time. You wanted your mother as the focal point. Fine. She can be the focal point of the SEC investigation. I'm not getting on a plane for a man who doesn't respect me. Mark's face crumpled. Sarah, please. They'll take everything. The house, the savings, everything is tied up. Maybe you should have thought about that when you decided who was the disposable member of this family. I replied, my resolve hardening. I'm done being disposable. Agent Miller cleared his throat. Mrs. Harrison, we still need those documents. If Mr. Harrison is unable to provide them, we will have to assume the worst. However, your cooperation now will be noted. I looked at the agent, a thought taking root in my mind. Agent Miller, I will cooperate. But I will only travel to retrieve those documents under one condition, that I am legally separated from Mark's liability and that I am treated not as his wife, but as a material witness whose cooperation is necessary to untangle the financial mess he created. Agent Miller, a seasoned professional, recognized the opportunity in my ultimatum. He exchanged a look with Officer Coloni, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in strategy. Mark, meanwhile, was speechless, his face a sickening mix of fear and indignation. Mrs. Harrison, if you have no direct knowledge of the alleged misrepresentations, we can certainly grant you the status of a cooperative witness, Agent Miller stated calmly. Your attorney can coordinate with our office once you've retrieved the documents. I don't have an attorney here, I said, keeping my gaze steady. I am, as you just witnessed, on a coerced vacation that I paid for. I need your office to facilitate the contact with a competent, independent counsel to protect my interests immediately. Mark finally found his voice, a desperate whisper. Sarah, stop. Don't hire a lawyer against me. I'm your husband. You stopped being my husband the moment you told your mother that I was less important than a piece of furniture, Mark. You just didn't realize the consequences, I retorted. Agent Miller pulled out his phone. I can contact the local U.S. Attorney's office to assign a public defender to advise you on your rights, Mrs. Harrison. We need to focus on securing those papers. I nodded. Understood. I will retrieve the papers. But I will not be doing it for him. I gestured toward Mark. I will be doing it to protect the financial well-being of my children, which he has recklessly endangered. The next few minutes were a flurry of activity. The agents escorted Mark and a still protesting Eleanor to a small lounge area to begin an initial interview, while Officer Coloni started politely guiding the children toward the front entrance. Lily and Ethan were sobbing, terrified by the sudden police presence and the anger between their parents. They looked at Eleanor, their former focal point, but she was too busy frantically whispering to Mark to comfort them. Lily ran to me, burying her face in my resort dress. Mommy, what's happening? Why are the policemen here? I want to go home. We are going home, sweetie, I said, holding her tight, finally feeling like the mother again, not the supporting actress. But right now, we just need to listen to the kind officer. Ethan, clutching his new drone, looked up at me, his eyes wide. Grandma said you were making a drama, Mom. But this isn't about a chair, is it? No, sweetheart, I said softly, running my hand through his damp hair. This is about truth. And sometimes the truth is scary. But we will be okay. The officer informed us that Mark, Eleanor, and the children would be taken to a standard, less expensive resort nearby, where they would await further instructions and the documents. I, as a cooperating witness, was free to travel immediately. You have 1 hour to vacate, Mr. Harrison, Agent Miller's voice echoed from the lounge. Please keep your personal belongings to 1 small bag each. This was the final, immediate humiliation for Eleanor. She had packed 12 suitcases. Now, she was forced to decide which of her designer kaftans and expensive jewelry sets to abandon in the seized villa. As I quickly packed a small carry-on with only the essentials, my passport, phone, and the clothes I was wearing, I saw Eleanor frantically arguing with Mark, trying to stuff 3 weeks' worth of clothes into a small tote. Mark looked defeated, sitting in the corner where I had been relegated the night before, the panoramic view now meaningless. He caught my eye. Sarah, please, when you get those papers, just give them to the agent here. Don't do anything drastic, he pleaded, his voice cracking. I didn't answer. I finished zipping my bag. As I walked past the dining banquette, I stopped for a moment. The center seat was empty. The clam bake ingredients were sitting on the counter, untouched. The illusion of the perfect, Eleanor-centric family vacation had vaporized. Agent Miller, I called out. I'm ready. I will fly back to Seattle immediately to retrieve the documents and cooperate with your investigation. I'm requesting that you book me a flight with an open return. I won't be returning to this villa. Mark surged to his feet. Sarah, wait. What about the kids? I paused at the door, turning back to face him, Eleanor, and my 2 bewildered children. You said your mother was the focal point, Mark. You said the kids love her more. Then let her be their focus now. You and your mother can deal with the fallout together. I'm going to protect the last piece of financial security I have left. And with that, I walked out of the villa I had paid for, leaving behind my husband, my mother-in-law, my luggage, and, finally, the crippling fear of confrontation. The journey back to Seattle was starkly different from the triumphant, tense flight just a day earlier. This time, I flew alone, in a quiet business-class cabin booked by the SEC agent, a silent acknowledgement of my new, critical status. There was no Eleanor, no Mark, no chattering children. Just me, the sterile efficiency of the aircraft, and the cold, hard clarity that had settled over me. I spent the 5-hour flight staring out the window, watching the Pacific shrink into a deep blue expanse. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of anger and betrayal, was now terrifyingly calm, operating with a ruthless focus I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't just flying back to retrieve documents, I was flying back to reclaim my life. The entire ordeal, the insult of the seat, the financial secrecy, the casual dismissal of my worth, had coalesced into one undeniable truth. My marriage was built on a foundation of neglect and prioritization of others over me. I reread the brief, formal text from the independent attorney Agent Miller had connected me with. His name was Mr. Chen, and his message was precise: retrieve the documents. Do not communicate with your husband or mother-in-law regarding the contents of the box. Your only communication should be with me and the SEC. It was a stark, professional confirmation that I was now operating as an individual entity, divorced from Mark's legal and emotional entanglement. The realization was liberating, despite the enormous fear of the future. I reflected on the title of my novel. We gave your seat to my mom, the kids love her more. Mark's words weren't just cruel, they were the consequence of years of Eleanor's manipulation, always arriving with lavish gifts, always undermining my rules, always positioning herself as the fun alternative to the disciplinary mother. But in the crisis, where was Eleanor's power? It vanished. When the police arrived, she retreated into self-preservation, more concerned with her own reputation and luggage than the terror in her grandchildren's eyes. She had been instantly revealed as a fair-weather friend and a situational focal point. I had been the one the children ran to when they were truly scared. I had been the one with the legal key, the boring, administrative wife who actually kept the family afloat with her remote job and her careful savings. My seat might have been on the periphery, but I was the foundation. As we began the descent into Seattle, the gray, familiar landscape felt comforting in its predictability. I was ready to face the music, but this time, I would be leading the orchestra. Upon landing, I was met at the gate, discreetly, by a representative from the SEC and a junior associate from Mr. Chen's law firm. The level of formality underscored the seriousness of Mark's situation and my new legal standing. We drove directly to the bank. The safe deposit box, located in a heavy vault, felt like the center of the universe. The process required my signature, my ID, and a final nod from the SEC associate watching nearby. I inserted the key I had carried on my chain for 3 years, never knowing its true value. The box slid out with a metallic screech. Inside, I found exactly what Mark had described: the original, hand-signed incorporation documents, the initial investor contracts, and several wire transfer receipts. But there was something else, tucked beneath the contracts, in a small, sealed envelope marked, "Do not open, Eleanor Harrison." My professional legal instruction was clear. Do not communicate with your husband or mother-in-law regarding the contents of the box. However, no one had said I couldn't look at everything else inside the box. I slid the envelope open, driven by a gut instinct. Inside was a single document, a notarized letter, dated 5 years ago, relinquishing all of Eleanor's financial interest in the family trust fund established by Mark's late father, transferring the entirety of her shares and all associated dividend rights to Mark. The letter stated clearly that Eleanor had sold her entire stake to Mark for $1.00 and other considerations to fund a new, undisclosed business venture, allowing him to use the money to capitalize his new startup. The initial capitalization that Mark claimed came from his savings and projections was actually financed by selling his mother out of his father's trust. This was the true, deep betrayal. Not the seat. Not the kids. Eleanor, the self-sacrificing mother, was actually a willing participant in Mark's financial risk, but she had never disclosed it to me. And Mark had used his mother's money, disguised it as corporate success, and then used my savings and my signature to secure the business, putting me on the hook for his fraud. I carefully placed the documents and the letter into the sex evidence bag. The center seat was no longer a matter of disrespect. It was a symbol of the entire, rotten foundation of my life with Mark. The journey back to Seattle was starkly different from the triumphant, tense flight just a day earlier. This time, I flew alone, in a quiet business-class cabin booked by the SEC agent, a silent acknowledgement of my new, critical status. There was no Eleanor, no Mark, no chattering children. Just me, the sterile efficiency of the aircraft, and the cold, hard clarity that had settled over me. I spent the 5-hour flight staring out the window, watching the Pacific shrink into a deep blue expanse. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of anger and betrayal, was now terrifyingly calm, operating with a ruthless focus I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't just flying back to retrieve documents, I was flying back to reclaim my life. The entire ordeal, the insult of the seat, the financial secrecy, the casual dismissal of my worth, had coalesced into one undeniable truth. My marriage was built on a foundation of neglect and prioritization of others over me. I reread the brief, formal text from the independent attorney Agent Miller had connected me with. His name was Mr. Chen, and his message was precise: retrieve the documents. Do not communicate with your husband or mother-in-law regarding the contents of the box. Your only communication should be with me and the SEC. It was a stark, professional confirmation that I was now operating as an individual entity, divorced from Mark's legal and emotional entanglement. The realization was liberating, despite the enormous fear of the future. I reflected on the title of my novel. We gave your seat to my mom, the kids love her more. Mark's words weren't just cruel, they were the consequence of years of Eleanor's manipulation, always arriving with lavish gifts, always undermining my rules, always positioning herself as the fun alternative to the disciplinary mother. But in the crisis, where was Eleanor's power? It vanished. When the police arrived, she retreated into self-preservation, more concerned with her own reputation and luggage than the terror in her grandchildren's eyes. She had been instantly revealed as a fair-weather friend and a situational focal point. I had been the one the children ran to when they were truly scared. I had been the one with the legal key, the boring, administrative wife who actually kept the family afloat with her remote job and her careful savings. My seat might have been on the periphery, but I was the foundation. As we began the descent into Seattle, the gray, familiar landscape felt comforting in its predictability. I was ready to face the music, but this time, I would be leading the orchestra. Upon landing, I was met at the gate, discreetly, by a representative from the SEC and a junior associate from Mr. Chen's law firm. The level of formality underscored the seriousness of Mark's situation and my new legal standing. We drove directly to the bank. The safe deposit box, located in a heavy vault, felt like the center of the universe. The process required my signature, my ID, and a final nod from the SEC associate watching nearby. I inserted the key I had carried on my chain for 3 years, never knowing its true value. The box slid out with a metallic screech. Inside, I found exactly what Mark had described: the original, hand-signed incorporation documents, the initial investor contracts, and several wire transfer receipts. But there was something else, tucked beneath the contracts, in a small, sealed envelope marked, "Do not open, Eleanor Harrison." My professional legal instruction was clear. Do not communicate with your husband or mother-in-law regarding the contents of the box. However, no one had said I couldn't look at everything else inside the box. I slid the envelope open, driven by a gut instinct. Inside was a single document, a notarized letter, dated 5 years ago, relinquishing all of Eleanor's financial interest in the family trust fund established by Mark's late father, transferring the entirety of her shares and all associated dividend rights to Mark. The letter stated clearly that Eleanor had sold her entire stake to Mark for $1.00 and other considerations to fund a new, undisclosed business venture, allowing him to use the money to capitalize his new startup. The initial capitalization that Mark claimed came from his savings and projections was actually financed by selling his mother out of his father's trust. This was the true, deep betrayal. Not the seat. Not the kids. Eleanor, the self-sacrificing mother, was actually a willing participant in Mark's financial risk, but she had never disclosed it to me. And Mark had used his mother's money, disguised it as corporate success, and then used my savings and my signature to secure the business, putting me on the hook for his fraud. I carefully placed the documents and the letter into the sex evidence bag. The center seat was no longer a matter of disrespect. It was a symbol of the entire, rotten foundation of my life with Mark. The revelation hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She staggered back, clutching her chest, the composure she had struggled to maintain in the dingy hotel lobby completely shattering. You shouldn't have opened that," she hissed, dropping the pretense of the sweet, well-meaning mother-in-law. "That was private. That was a necessary, small sacrifice for Mark's success." Mark looked confused, then horrified. "Mom? What is she talking about? What trust?" I turned to Mark, finally understanding the depth of his secrecy and his mother's enabling. "He's still keeping it from you, isn't he, Eleanor? He didn't tell you the whole truth either. You thought you were helping him succeed, but you were actually just cleaning up his mess." I looked back at Eleanor. "You sold him your shares, Eleanor. He used that money as the initial capitalization, claiming it was his own hard-earned seed money, a lie he then perpetuated to attract other investors. He didn't just give you my seat, Eleanor. He's been using you as a shield for years, playing the devoted son while you cover his tracks. Eleanor's lips trembled. That is not true. He told me he was using the money to build a foundation for the family. I did it for the children. No, you did it for Mark's ego, I countered firmly. And when it started going south, he put my name on the legal paperwork, not yours, because he knew I'd be the compliant, unsuspecting signatory. And then, he brought you on this trip, on my dime, not because the kids love you more, but because he needed you close to manage the fallout of the business collapse he saw coming. Mark, finally piecing together the full picture of the secret family transaction that excluded him, looked from his mother to me, a mixture of rage and utter devastation on his face. Mom? Is that true? He demanded, his voice trembling. You sold the trust shares? You never told me you signed them over to me. You told me that money was gone, that you just wanted me to succeed. Eleanor burst into tears, messy, ugly sobs that were entirely unlike her usual controlled dramatics. It was the only way, Mark. Your father, he was always so judgmental. I didn't want him to know I was funding your risky startup. I just wanted you to prove him wrong. The sight of the two of them unraveling in the center of the hotel lobby was painful, but necessary. The years of carefully constructed lies, of Mark's duplicity and Eleanor's enabling, were finally collapsing. The children, Lily and Ethan, were watching, their initial fear now replaced by confusion and a growing distrust. They saw their fun, glamorous grandma turn into a weeping, deceitful woman. They saw their strong, capable father reduced to a desperate, lying man. I put my hands on the children's shoulders. Lily, Ethan, we are leaving. We are going back to Seattle, and we are going to start over. Daddy and Grandma have some very serious things to sort out, and they need to do it by themselves. Mark lunged toward me, fear overriding his pride. No, Sarah, don't take the kids. I need them. They can't leave. I need the family to stay together. You should have thought about keeping the family together when you jeopardized our life savings and then chose to insult me in front of them, I said, not backing down. You wanted your mother in the center seat, Mark. You wanted her to be the focal point. Well, she has it now. You two are the focal point of a federal investigation, and I am taking our children out of the line of fire. The look in Mark's eyes was one of pure, unadulterated regret. He finally understood the cost of that single, symbolic chair. He hadn't just slighted his wife, he had alienated the one person who could have saved him without conditions. I turned my back on them and walked away, leading my children out of the cheap, sterile lobby and toward the waiting car. The emotional distance I felt was enormous, a chasm separating me from the wreckage I was leaving behind. The flight back to Seattle with Lily and Ethan was quiet, but peaceful. They nestled against me, drawing comfort from my steady presence, their little hands clutching mine. The memory of the fun grandma was fading fast, replaced by the memory of the angry, weeping stranger in the lobby. I had reclaimed my seat, not physically at a table, but in the heart of my immediate family. The truth, ugly as it was, had been the necessary clearing of the air. Upon arrival, Mr. Chen had already secured temporary accommodations for us, a small, clean apartment while the disposition of our house and assets was determined by the SEC. He also had a divorce petition drafted, ready for my signature. I sat in the lawyer's office the next morning, reviewing the document. It was surreal to formalize the end of a 10-year marriage with a pen stroke. I hadn't cried yet, and I realized I wasn't crying because I was mourning a marriage. I was mourning the idea of a marriage I had desperately wanted but never truly had. Mrs. Harrison, you have been incredibly cooperative, Mr. Chen said, tapping the papers. The SEC is viewing you strictly as a material witness. Given the evidence you provided, your assets, especially the funds tied to your remote job and your separate retirement accounts, should be entirely protected. Mark, however, is facing severe charges. And Eleanor? I asked. She's facing questioning as an undisclosed financial backer and co-conspirator. Her insistence on defending Mark has only worsened her position. She lost her seat at the table long before she lost the chair at the resort. I signed the petition. The pen felt heavy, but the action was light, a lifting of a burden I had carried for years. Later that day, I was at the temporary apartment, unpacking the essentials that Mr. Chen's team had retrieved from our house. I found a note taped to the inside of my closet door. It was from Mark, hastily written before the SEC seized everything. Sarah, if you see this, please forgive me. I know I screwed up. Not just with the money, but with Mom. I should never have let her treat you that way. And I never should have said that thing about the kids. I panicked. I love you. Please come home. Save me. I need your strength. The note was a selfish plea, focused on his need for me to save him and come home, rather than any genuine remorse for the hurt he had inflicted. The sincerity was overshadowed by the desperation of a drowning man looking for a life raft. He still didn't see me, he saw a resource. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. The Mark I thought I married, the man who would have fiercely defended me against his mother, was a fantasy. The real Mark was a weak, easily manipulated son who prioritized his mother's approval and his own financial secrets over his wife's dignity and well-being. I pulled out my laptop and immediately called my boss. I asked for a temporary leave of absence, citing a family emergency. She granted it immediately, reminding me of my value to the company. Then, I looked at the reservation confirmation for the Hawaiian villa, still in my inbox. The non-refundable deposit was huge, but the entire cost had been paid. The rest of the week was still booked and paid for, now sitting empty, evidence of a life that no longer existed. I picked up the phone and called the Four Seasons Hualalai. I asked to speak to the general manager. Hello, this is Sarah Harrison. I am the client who booked the presidential oceanfront villa that was recently vacated due to a legal issue. Mrs. Harrison, I'm terribly sorry for the disruption, the manager said, instantly professional. I know the rental is non-refundable, I continued. But I have an unusual request. I need to rebook the villa, only for 2 nights, for just 3 people, myself and my 2 children. And I want to use the remaining value of the existing reservation. The manager was hesitant. That's highly irregular, Mrs. Harrison. The villa has been sealed, and there are legal proceedings. The legal proceedings relate to Mr. Mark Harrison and his mother, Eleanor Harrison. I am cooperating with the SEC as a material witness, I explained, using my new legal status as leverage. I need to return to the location to collect a few small personal items and, more importantly, to give my children a sense of closure. I am requesting that the villa be unsealed for 48 hours, for my exclusive, supervised use. The manager, clearly intimidated by the mention of the SEC, promised to call me back. I waited, hopeful but prepared for a refusal. 30 minutes later, the phone rang. Mrs. Harrison, we have been advised by the local authorities that, given your status, we can accommodate your request. The villa will be fully cleaned and unsealed. You and your children will be the only guests on the property. We will have a new reservation manager assigned solely to your needs. I hung up the phone, a small, victorious smile spreading across my face. I was going back to Hawaii. Not as the subservient wife on the periphery, but as the owner, the decision-maker, the person in the center seat. We flew back to Kona 2 days later. The difference in this journey was staggering. The SEC had even arranged for a child therapist to meet with Lily and Ethan before we left, helping them process the dramatic events. They were calm, rested, and excited. When the resort car pulled up to the presidential oceanfront villa, the entrance was quiet, pristine, and utterly devoid of the chaos we had left behind. The air smelled only of plumeria and salt, no tension, no underlying strain. We walked inside, and the kids, instead of shrieking and running toward the pool, walked quietly into the main living room. Lily pointed to the dining banquette. "That's where Grandma was sitting when the men in suits came," she said simply. Ethan nodded. "She was crying, Mom. Not sad crying. Angry crying." I knelt between them. "Yes, sweethearts. That's right. Grandma and Daddy were having a very grown-up problem that had nothing to do with you. And now, we are going to make a new memory here. A good memory, just the three of us." I stood up and walked to the banquette. The resort staff had removed all the intrusive personal items: Eleanor's photos, her beanbag, Mark's discarded note. The space was beautiful, clean, and silent. I walked straight to the panoramic center seat, the one I had mentally claimed months ago, the one Mark had given away with such callous disregard. I paused, then slowly, deliberately, sat down. I motioned for the children. "Lily, you sit on my right. Ethan, you sit on my left. I want to tell you a story." They scrambled up, settling against me. I was physically in the center, and they were pressed against me, their small bodies a warm, comforting pressure. I was finally the focal point, not by force or manipulation, but by choice and necessity. I told them a story about a queen who built a beautiful castle, and how an outsider tried to convince the king that she wasn't important enough to sit on the main throne. But when a storm came, it was the queen who knew where the keys to the treasure were, and it was the queen who protected the kingdom, proving her worth not with gifts, but with strength and love. They listened, rapt. When I finished, Lily leaned up and kissed my cheek. "You're the queen, Mommy. And this is your seat." That evening, the new reservation manager, a lovely woman named Sophia, brought us a spectacular, private dinner prepared by the resort's top chef. It was just the three of us, sitting at the enormous teak table, under the soft glow of the setting Hawaiian sun. From my center seat, the panoramic view was magnificent. I could see the curve of the horizon, the dark silhouette of the palms, and the subtle, changing colors of the sky. It was a view of the world, vast and full of possibility, no longer restricted by the confines of my marriage or the demands of my in-laws. I talked to the children, not about their father's problems, but about their future. I told them about my new plan. We would sell the house, I would continue my work, and we would travel and explore. I wanted them to see the world as a place of open doors, not closed vaults. Later, after the children were asleep, I walked out to the pool. I pulled out my phone and found Mark's number. I had to make one final, clear statement. He answered on the first ring, his voice low and weary. "Sarah? Oh God, where are you? Are you safe? The agents are still here, asking questions. They won't let me leave the island." "I know, Mark," I said, looking out at the infinity pool, which merged seamlessly with the dark ocean. "I'm in Hawaii. I'm sitting in the center seat of the villa, and the kids are asleep in their beds. We're safe." The silence on the other end was heavy. He knew what that meant. He knew the significance of the seat I was occupying. "I got your note," I continued. "And I won't be coming home to save you, Mark. You created this mess, and you need to face it alone. I have filed for divorce. I'm protecting my children and myself." Mark's voice, when he finally spoke, was choked with despair. "Sarah, please. Don't do this. I'm sorry about the seat. I was an idiot. I was stressed, and Mom was manipulating me. I love you. I promise I will never let her dictate our life again. I'll send her back to Seattle. Just please, please don't leave me." "You didn't give away the seat because you were stressed, Mark," I countered, my voice flat, devoid of anger or sorrow. "You gave it away because you didn't value my presence enough to fight for it. You gave it away because your mother had convinced you that my role was subservient to hers. That was your choice, and this is my consequence." I paused, letting the silence convey the finality of my decision. "The papers are with the SEC. My lawyer is handling the divorce. I will ensure you have appropriate access to the children, once you have stabilized your life and resolved your legal issues. But our life together is over. What about the kids, Sarah? What did you tell them? He pleaded. I told them the truth, I said. I told them that a family is built on honesty and respect, not secrets and who sits where. And I told them that their mother is strong enough to protect them from the consequences of lies. I ended the call, cutting off his frantic protests. It was done. The conversation didn't give me the dramatic closure I might have once craved, but it gave me something far more valuable: peace. I sat by the pool for a long time, watching the stars come out. The 2 nights we spent in the villa were transformative. The time was used not for luxury, but for emotional healing and bonding. We swam, we explored the beach, and we laughed, real, genuine, uninterrupted laughter. On our final morning, I sat in the center seat one last time, sipping my coffee. Lily and Ethan were playing quietly nearby, building a sandcastle that incorporated the resort's hedge maze. Sophia, the manager, approached me with the final bill. Mrs. Harrison, I have to say, it has been an honor to host you and your wonderful children. I wish you all the best. She then handed me a small, sealed envelope. This was left on the concierge desk for you by a resort security guard this morning. He said it was an emergency. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on a crumpled piece of napkin. Sarah, I'm sorry. The kids don't love me more. They miss you. They need you. I heard what you told Mark. You're right. You were always the foundation. I took the easy way out. I'm leaving the island. Be well. E. Eleanor's final, brief confession was not a heartfelt apology, but an acknowledgement of defeat, a concession that the children's affection was situational, not unconditional. The kids' love her more was a temporary fabrication, shattered by the first real tremor of adversity. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the nearest recycling bin. Her concession didn't matter anymore. Her opinion didn't matter. As we were leaving the villa, the 3 of us stopped at the dining banquette. Lily ran to the center seat and kissed the cushion. Bye, Queen seat. Ethan hugged my waist. Where do we go now, Mom? I looked at my 2 beautiful children, held them tight, and finally, genuinely, smiled. We go home, sweethearts. But we are not going to our old house. We are going to a new home, one that we choose together. A place where Mommy will always sit in the center seat. I wasn't just Sarah Harrison, wife of Mark Harrison, anymore. I was Sarah Harrison, the one who found the key, the one who navigated the crisis, and the one who finally learned to prioritize her own worth. I walked out of the villa, holding my children's hands, ready to face the world from my new, rightful place. The view from the center seat was breathtakingly clear.